off our next presentation. Thanks to everybody who's just joining. Thanks to everybody who's been here all morning. Our next presenter is going to be Dr. Ari Zelmanow, and he's going to be giving a really interesting talk. I've seen him present in person. Remember in-person conferences? That was a thing. And he's just a very captivating speaker, and I'm excited to hear this next talk. So what I'm going to do is just shut my mouth. You know, I'll let that be the intro, and I'll let Ari take it from there. Topic of his discussion is going to be how to interview like a detective. Fascinating. So again, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let Ari do his thing. I'm going to stop sharing so that he can. And Ari, you can take it away.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to share here. I need to make sure the first question I'm going to have is, can you see the slide? And nothing else, just the slide. Okay, I'm working with two monitors for the first time, since COVID hit. So I'm going to jump right in because I've got a lot to share today, and I want to see if I can get through it in an hour. It's going to be tough, but I'm going to do it. So my father told me every good story begins with once upon a time. So I always like to say once upon a time. But the reality is that what I want to talk about today is interviewing, and the problem is that interviews get a bad rap, and a lot of there's a lot of reasons for that. So I want to start by having everybody go through a paradigm shift. So if you didn't know, I was a police detective, and when in St. Louis, and one of my assignments as a detective was in the Crimes Against Persons unit, specifically focused on child abuse. So on a warm day in May, I was called to the hospital about a suspicious death of a child. And so I go to the hospital to find a very, very dirty, like not a thin layer of dirt, not just some dirt, but like a layer of dirt across a 9-year-old child who had pretty severe injuries. And I can't see everybody's face, or I can't ask for a show of hands, but if you've ever seen the movie Misery, the child had ankle injuries consistent with being hobbled. So both ankles were broken. So my partner and I go to the house to investigate further. And here's a picture of the house, pretty nondescript, like many houses, it's fine. And so we go into the house and I look into the fridge. And as you can see this picture of the fridge is dirty, and you can see the Zesta crackers down in the lower left of the screen. And you can see the amount of food in the house, okay? So I've just given you a data point. I'm going to give you a second data point. I'm like, okay, well, we need to go through the house. Let's go to the bathroom. So I go to the bathroom and I find this. This is the water. They didn't have running water. They used this as water. And you can see that it's pretty dirty. You can't really see the toilet very well, but it doesn't function. Remember, I told you the child's 9. So this is the bathtub and the shower. So I ask you, for a 9-year-old child, if you look carefully, you'll see those are all diapers. So why is a 9-year-old child wearing diapers? And then finally, we go to the kitchen. And this is the kitchen of the house. And you can see the sink is full and there's trash and stuff everywhere. So let me ask you this now. I've just given you 6 data points. How much more evidence do you need to see before I can convince you that this house is unlivable and this child was abused or neglected? I'm betting I don't have to give you any more data points. And this becomes one of the problems with interviews and convincing stakeholders of things, is that they feel they need a ton of data to be able to make a decision, but I've just given you 6 data points. So those are kind of at odds. So I'm going to give you a few other things because I need this paradigm shift to occur to understand really how and why interviews work. The crux of this is to focus on quality, not on quantity. So this paradigm shift is why interviews can be a very effective form of research for businesses. So the other argument for this is that if you compare to the budgets that big brands have for research, they can spend millions of dollars. Dollar for dollar, smaller businesses can't win. And big businesses are still stuck in an old way of doing things. So I always like to tell this story in the business sense, because you're like, well, that's neat, Ari, but that's like detective work. So how does that really work in the business space? And so what I would say is consider Febreze. Febreze started in a laboratory with a scientist who was working, he was a smoker, and he was working on this formula. And one day he sprayed it on himself, went home, and his wife said, "Did you quit smoking?" And he said, "No." "Why?" She goes, "I can't smell any cigarette odor on you." And at that point, he goes back to the lab. He tells Febreze that he found this thing that actually kills odors. And they immediately like, wow, this is a biggest breakthrough ever. We are going to create this and launch this. And they get everything ready. The brand teams go out and buy Ferraris. Everybody's really, really excited. And what happens is they launch. And this is what happened according to internal P&G report. Febreze is a Procter & Gamble brand. They disappoint. They should consider terminating the product. Sales goal unmet every week. And what they did wasn't go back and look at big data. They didn't look at artificial intelligence, and they didn't look at machine learning. It wasn't huge customer surveys. In fact, a customer survey wouldn't have even captured the right data. What it was is a few interviews. They went to a house in Arizona and they talked to this woman who had a bunch of cats. So as they approached the threshold, the researchers approached the threshold of the door. One of them literally gags at the odor, the scent, the odor of cat. So they go in, they sit on the couch and they talk to her and they say, "So what do you do about this cat smell?" She's like, "Well, that's funny. It's usually not a problem." And they're like, "Well, do you smell it now?" "No, isn't it wonderful? My cats hardly smell at all." This data point is what really pivoted Febreze from being an odor killer to being an odor killer that has a fresh scent. So remember, Febreze was odorless when they launched it. But the problem is that people that smoke and people that have cats and people that have houses that smell different than others, they don't smell that. They become accustomed to that odor, and so they don't notice it. So Febreze was being sold to people who didn't even realize they had a problem. Well, once Procter & Gamble discovered this from a group of interviews, sales exploded. 200 million in 1 year, 1 billion a year today. They had made a huge marketing error. They were trying to sell something to these people that didn't have a problem. And so you can learn now how to get in front of this problem today with with a few of the research pathways I'm going to show you. But again, it starts with focusing on the quality of the data and not on the quantity. Another big problem with data is this. When you consider big data solutions, fancy algorithms, machine learning, you have no idea what's inside, right? Unless you work for the company and you're actually involved in the development of that. But even if you are a mathematical machine learning coding wizard and you're presented with another company's thing, they don't show you what's inside this black box. It's a secret. And so what could actually be inside the black box is just this. So if you ever, and finally, a lot of these big data or machine learning or AI solutions, they offer a guarantee. And I have to show you a brief video of what I think of when I think of guarantees.
Why would somebody put a guarantee on a box? Very interesting.
Go on, I'm listening.
Here's the way I see it, Ted. Guy puts a fancy guarantee in a box because he wants you to feel all warm and toasty inside.
Yeah, makes a man feel good.
Of course it does. Why shouldn't it? You figure you put that little box under your pillow at night, the guarantee fairy might come by and leave a quarter. Am I right, Ted?
What's your point?
The point is, how do you know the fairy isn't a crazy glue sniffer? Building model airplanes, says the little fairy. Well, we're not buying it. If he sneaks into your house once, that's all it takes. Next thing you know, there's money missing off the dresser and your daughter's knocked up. I've seen it 100 times.
But why do they put a guarantee on the box then?
Because they know all they sold you was a guaranteed piece of shit. That's all it is, isn't it? Hey, if you want me to take a dump in a box and mark it guaranteed, I will. I got spare time. But for now, for your customer's sake, for your daughter's sake, you might want to think about buying a quality product from me.
Okay, I'll buy from you.
So as you can see, guarantees.
Why would somebody...
Guarantees are only as good as the guarantee. So focus on quality, not on quantity. Finally, interviews are really well suited for examining problems that are more recent. So consider the problem of induction. I don't want you to be a turkey. So this turkey, every day, he lives outside. The farmer comes out, gives him water, feeds him, takes care of him. He has open range to walk around the farm. Everything's great. So the turkey has become accustomed to looking at the world and understanding the world from the things that have been happening day after day after day. The turkey isn't really looking at the now or what's ahead. And this works until you look at the 1,001 days in the life of a Thanksgiving turkey. So food, water up until day 1,000, and then the Thanksgiving day hits and it's the surprise. And that, of course, is what happens. So interviews capture things in real time or near real time. So I would urge all of you to take caution when trying to predict things from the past. Focus on quality, not on quantity. Also, more data is not always the answer. In fact, it's rarely the answer. More data equals more problems. Data rarely helps you find a needle in a haystack. In fact, it only creates a bigger haystack. And you can find the number of spurious correlations that don't really matter to the number of variables increase. For example, if you look at the divorce rate in Maine and per capita consumption of margarine, they're highly correlated between the years of 2000 and 2009, 99% correlated, in fact. So does that, yes, we all will agree that correlation does not equate to causation, and there's probably no relationship. But when you add a lot of new data variables, these are the things you can find, and they're probably unrelated. Focus on quality, not on quantity. And finally, I would tell you, sometimes small data will beat big data and reach the right conclusions faster, more reliably, and lower cost. So again, focus on quality, not on quantity. So then I would say to this, okay, well, Ari, what do we do with this? Well, today I'm going to show you how to interview like a detective. Thinking like a detective and interviewing this way gets us closer to small data. It gets us closer to people, and people is really where we live. So there are 5 primary customer interview types, right? There are interviews that lead to foresight and trends. There's interviews that help us explore competitive intelligence. There's business originated interviews, which exist when you already have a product, service, or offering in flight. And most of the interviews that we in consumer insights and market insights do fall into that space. There's consumer originated. This is where you don't have a product developed. We're developing a brand new product, not a new product extension, but a brand new product. This is a lot of in the tech space. This is a lot where user experience sometimes lives in the early stages, but it's really focused on new product innovation. And then there's customer interrogation. And of course that gives everybody pause, because I would tell you there's only one occasion where you interrogate customers. So the difference as a detective between interviews and interrogation are interviews are fact-finding. Interrogations are looking for an affirmation of guilt. So I'm affirming that I'm guilty, or and I'm trying to get you to make a statement to that effect. So customer interrogation for researchers really falls in developing case studies, developing marketing collateral, and developing social proof. So these are the times when you know a customer's happy with a product, but you're trying to elicit a statement to that so you can use that in marketing. That is the only time customer interrogation works. Since we have such a limited amount of time today, I'm going to focus on the two areas that give the biggest, offer the biggest punch. Those are business originated and consumer originated. The reason is Pareto, right? It's the 80-20 rule. That this is where most of the effort and most of the things start from. It's also foundational to all of the other interviews. As I told you, there are more interviews that are better suited to refinement. So in the marketing space, you might be looking at brand awareness, positioning, and product. You might be looking at innovation for a product or a product extension, so customer development, product development. You might be looking at segmentation. This is also an area where we can help businesses with funnel analysis. So in customer experience, where you're thinking about the sales funnel, awareness, consideration, preference, purchase, loyalty, and advocacy. And this is where customer satisfaction lives as well. And then finally, you can also offer services, because you're interviewing like a detective, to engineer sales conversations. So you're understanding what prospects need to hear, to understand, to increase a close rate. And then in the consumer originated, you could be hired or be tasked with how we want to develop a brand new product. We need to understand that. So understanding that there's these two areas matters. And it's a matter, the reason it matters is one falls under deductive reasoning and one falls under inductive reasoning. Now, Sherlock Holmes always it's always been said that he deduces things. Well, he actually induces things, but let's not mince words here. Let's say that we're going to do both. Business originated problems exist when a product is developed. You're then going to develop a hypothesis, which is identifying segments or jobs. So you're looking for where does this product fit? You're going to test it, and then you're either going to have success, huge success, or you're going to go back, and ultimately you'll probably continue to refine that. Inductive reasoning exists when you're like, I've got a customer segment. There's an unmet need in that market. I need to explore and understand what's happening. I'm going to uncover why people like hire. So when I say hire, I mean, right now, if you're taking notes with a pencil, you're taking notes with a pen, you might be taking notes with a tablet, or you could be taking notes on your computer. Each one of those things has been hired by you. Hired meaning you've chosen it to do a specific job for you over the others. That is a job, and that's under jobs to be done theory, which was popularized by Harvard business professor Clayton Christensen, and it's still widely used in innovation and tech today. And you're going to do that, and then you're going to develop a product. And then from that product, you're going to go back, and then it becomes a business originated problem where you're iterating on it. So going a step deeper, it's a matter of reason. Deductive reasoning is top down. So you're starting with a theory, like you have a product. I think that this is going to do this. We're going to observe, confirm. Inductive is bottom up. We're kind of observing the market, looking for patterns, developing a hypothesis, and then having a theory. The point with interviews and why they're so effective is that it allows you to move relatively quickly. A conclusion can always seem true at one point, but further evidence can change that. And all of us as consumer insights professionals and detectives have Bayesian agility, which is the ability to modify a probability of a hypothesis being true as new evidence is supplied. So when we're researching something, we shouldn't be researching necessarily to prove something, unless that's your hypothesis. It should then be to prove or disprove it. You can have hypotheses, but you should be going with an open mind and the ability to be agile on this. So again, I want to remind you all to focus on quality, not on quantity. So how do we operationalize this? Well, I know that we have a wide group of people watching this. Some already have a deep understanding of some of these things, but some may have less. And so it always starts with, if you fail to plan, you should plan to fail, okay? So you should always have a research plan, even if you're just doing interviews. And I said just, but I don't think of interviews as just. So you want to name your project, give it a name. I want you to always provide some background relative to the problem you're trying to solve. And this is going to become really clear why soon when I take you through this process. But why are you doing this project? Like, is it a business originated problem? Is it a consumer originated problem? Like, what's the business case? What are the gaps in the knowledge? And then what's the business going to do with what you learned? Because if you can't answer those three things, you shouldn't be doing the research project to begin with. Then I want you to think of research objectives and key results or questions. So if you notice, I've entered something into here that probably hasn't been seen a lot before. Yes, research objectives and questions have, but key results haven't. Key results are things like, I want you to think of an objective as I'm trying to accomplish this, and a key result as replace that with as measured by. So an objective is something you're trying to accomplish, but I want you to think about, how will I know if I've accomplished this objective? And so that should be as part of this document. I want you to outline those things. You want to keep your objectives SMART, like specific, measurable, actionable, and relevant to the project. There can also be primary and secondary research objectives. And then I want you to go through the approach. So your approach, obviously, in this case, is we're going to conduct five interviews with this group of people. I want you to identify who the sample is, and then I want you to kind of figure out what a timeline for your project should be. Once you get this dialed in and you're interviewing appropriately, you can be doing customer interviews for clients, or if you're in-house, you could be doing rounds of customer interviews in weeks, 2 weeks. Now, as a detective, the single most important thing that we look at is who. Who is important? Who is the most important? Detectives focus on 3 primary groups of people: witnesses, victims, and suspects. As applied researchers, we're focusing on 3 primary groups of people: customers, potential customers, and non-customers. Knowing the difference is key, because by doing that, you're able to control for variance of your sample on the front end. This is why small sample research works. It's because you're not throwing things out and hoping to capture enough sample that you're seeing some repeatable things and you're getting this bell-shaped curve, which, by the way, doesn't really exist in applied research anyway, but that's a conversation for another day. We are controlling for the variables that we think influence things on the front end. Who is so important? And then I always feel like I need to take a moment to say it's B2C or B2B customers. But there's a famous marketer who leads digital marketing. His name's Ryan Deiss. And what he says is B2C or B2B doesn't really matter. It's H to H. And he's right. It's human to human. No matter what, whether you're talking to business to consumer or business to business, you're still talking to people. But B2B isn't a single person. There are decision makers, there are economic buyers, there's recommenders, there's influencers, and then there's users. I'm gonna have to change that word. I don't like the word users. I like customers better, or consumers. But either way, and then along that whole spectrum, there's saboteurs. There's people that will sabotage a B2B buying process throughout. Knowing how that paradigm works or how that works within a business helps you help your clients understand marketing decisions or research decisions, because sometimes you might be doing research on decision makers and other times you might be doing research on influencers. It matters. Being very specific matters. Which brings us to the next point, which is the screening criteria and quotas section. So with screening criteria and quotas, you want to be very, very specific. So prior to my role at Panasonic, I worked at Twitter and we were doing some work on developers. And as you can see, there were some screening criteria we used to decide who we wanted to speak with. Now, this was because we were looking for a broader range. If you're looking for very specific people, you might say, we want this number of people with these criteria, and then do that. And then as you can see below, there are termination criteria or exclusionary criteria. Those are things that as you screen people, you're screening them out. And there are others that you're gonna either establish quotas for, or you're just gonna have some sort of descriptive statistics, but you want to develop your screener. And then we go to the interview. So the interview is an interesting part. And as a detective, as you'll see here, also, I love Alice in Wonderland. And being a detective is basically chasing the white rabbit. You're kind of investigating things, seeing what pops, and doing that. And so we like to ask why a lot. But we don't, as researchers, applied researchers, want to use the question why. People are terrible at telling you why. I know I should exercise more. Ask me why. And I'm going to come up with reasons, but they're probably not the real reason why. So instead of asking why, I'm giving you 6 why prompts to get to the core of that. One of them, tell me more. Ari, it's interesting you said you want to exercise more. Can you tell me more about that? Yeah, I want to exercise more, but I feel like I don't have the time. How does that make you feel? And do you see what I'm doing there is I'm now getting to the emotion of something. If in business and sales and in marketing, people do things emotionally and they justify with logic or ration after the fact. If we only made logical and rational decisions, nobody would buy Bentleys, right? I mean, they're a very expensive car. They make you feel a certain way, and then you rationalize and justify it after the fact, which is fine. I think it's great that we do that. But we have to recognize that as researchers, this is the way people work. Ari, okay, just so I have it right, Ari, did I get any of that wrong? No, I think you got that right. Or it gives them a chance to fix it. What made you decide to do X? That's better than asking, why did you do X? They're not going to know why, but they could tell you the steps and the things. And as a researcher, it's your job to put that puzzle together. And then I want you to use silence to your advantage. Don't respond and let the silence prompt people to keep speaking. So that's a pause, or that's a pause. They feel long to me, but they're probably very short. But when you introduce silence into the equation, it encourages people to keep speaking and expand on what they're saying. As a detective, we would do this a lot. So what would happen is, and we would do it, we would use silence to let people go, but suspects would also use silence. So, or they'll use silence and then they'll use a prompt. So you would ask a question and they would say, what? And then there'd be silence, waiting for you to fill in the gap. But as a police officer, if I use silence, they heard the question. I'd say, what's your name? They'd say, what? And then I let silence drive them to tell me their name. Because I knew they heard they were trying to buy some time. Use silence to your advantage. So I love Alice in Wonderland, as you can see, the second quote from this. Alice asks, "What you tell me? Tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here." "That depends a good deal on where you want to go," said the Cheshire Cat. "I don't much care where," Alice responds. "Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go. As long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, you're sure to do that if only you walk long enough." The point I'm making with this, when we talk about an interview, is if you don't have a discussion guide, you're going to get somewhere, but it might not be where you want it to go, but it's going to be somewhere. Discussion guides are important, and I like to use the rules of 5. At Interview University, the group that I use to teach interviewing and interviewing skills, I teach that you should have 5 to 7 interviews with 5 to 7 core questions. That's the starting point. So you start with 5 to 7 per issue, 5 to 7 core questions, 5 to 7 interviews. With video conference, you want to aim for 30-minute interviews. I know as applied researchers, there's a history of us taking an hour, or there's a history of us doing other things. An hour on video conference can be hard. You want to aim for a 30-minute interview. I'm going to tell you at Panasonic, we just did a big round of interviews. They were 60-minute B2B interviews. We were able to land those. If you can get them and they work for you, great. But I teach, like, start by aiming for 30-minute interviews, doing more interviews with shorter time periods than longer interviews, or less interviews with longer time periods. And some of that also matters if you're trying to go for depth or breadth. But I want you to be, your discussion guide to be focused on an area of interest, 5 to 7 core questions. Be flexible. Also start with a warm-up, and then a warm-up, what I mean by that is you don't want to jump right into an interview. And the cool thing about video conferencing is, generally speaking, or interviews at people's houses, you can look around you and you can find things of interest, and then you can use those as discussion points. Spend 2 to 5 minutes warming up with somebody, and it's going to pay off huge throughout the interview, because it's going to be more conversational. And then at the end of an interview, you want to close a loop. You don't want to just get up and leave. You don't want to just stop the interview. You want to, like, let people know what's going to happen next. Detectives, we did this too. Witnesses want to know, like, what's going to happen. Victims definitely want to know what happened. And suspects are curious too. They want to know, am I going to jail? What's next here? So now I'm going to give you some rules. So in the detective world, or in interviews, revealed preferences. And notice there's hashtags. It's a call back to my days at Twitter. Data validity will be maintained by collecting what people do, not what people will say they do. It's the difference between revealed versus stated preferences. Revealed preferences are what I do. Stated are what I want to do. I don't work out, but I aspire to. Recency matters. People will have a good recollection of things that have happened more recent than longer ago. And that recollection becomes such where they're going to remember really high points and really low points. They're probably not going to remember a lot in the middle, unless you have hit on a point that in their mind they've made some sort of connection to you. So there's semantic connections in everybody's brain. If I say something, it might bring you back to your high school days. You might remember something in your high school days, and then et cetera, et cetera. Go nonlinear. You don't have to ask every question in the exact same order. So as a detective, we would ask, there's some standard questions we would ask, like, I want your name, address, date of birth, but then I would ask other things, and then I could always circle back. Remember, I told you to be conversational. You aren't Joe Friday. We're not interrogating people. We want conversation and the interview to feel like they're talking to a friend. The more comfortable they feel with you, the more they will open up and the more they will share. The more guarded they feel, the less they will open up to you and the less they will share. I want you to give pause. Short pause is going to feel like a long time to you. Interviewees sometimes have to think about things. If you jump right in, they're going to stop thinking about it and think about the next question. Those pauses matter. give pause, slow down, give it time. For the record, I want you to take notes and record interviews. There's lots of golden interviews, and sometimes you'll be asking a question, listening for something, and you'll miss something else. The only way you're going to get that is if you've recorded it. You also want to be able to review and share these later. Now, I want to take a minute here and mention note-taking. In an interview, when I say you're taking notes, I don't want you, this is why you record. I don't want you looking down, writing and taking notes. You're missing things. You're missing body language. You're missing other things by doing that. That is why we record interviews. You should record 100% of your interviews unless the person being interviewed rejects it. And then you got to go to teamwork makes the dream work. Ideally, one person is conducting the interview, the other is taking notes. Remember, saturation is what we're trying to get to here. You're talking to participants until they all sound about the same. In the applied setting, I find that this happens, but starts happening between 5 and 7 interviews, sometimes as many as 12. If you're not hearing it after 12, something's wrong. If you're either interviewing on a topic where people are all over the place, you've recruited the wrong people, you're missing a variable, something is wrong if you're not hitting saturation after 12 interviews. And then remember, interview, not interrogate. You're there to learn about people's experience, not get a confession or convince them that your product, service, or idea rocks. Remember this: who, what, when, where, and how, not why. Aim to ask what and how. They're bad at telling you why. Why did you buy my product is a shitty question. Why did you choose between product X and product? How did you choose between product X and product Y? Better. What about product X made you think that it'd be a good match? That's a good question. Remember, no Matlock, you're not cross-examining people during a trial. Don't lead your interviewees. Isn't it true, Ari, that you ate a bagel this morning for breakfast? Now you've got me saying yes or no, and avoid yes or no questions. And listen, leave room for explanation and listen. And then I want you to dig deep. The best stuff comes when you dig a little deeper on something that strikes you. So the script is your roadmap. Remember, it's a plan, but it's okay for you to diverge from the plan. There's no reason you can't return to it after some period of time. And what's really interesting is, let's say you diverge and you get a bunch of gold and you only hit 2 questions on your interview guide. Well, there's 2 things that could happen. Either A, the interviewer is going to be like, hey, I can go a little longer, it's cool. Or the interviewee can go a little longer, Or B, okay, you hit it on the next interview. But you've gotten something that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And the whole purpose of this is to add value to your conversation or to your research. Remember, focus on quality, not on quantity. This is a reminder. All of your interviews should be recorded unless the person being interviewed does not explicitly give consent for that. You want people to consent to interviews. Don't record people without them knowing, but you want to ask and get consent. I have had, in my history of doing this work in the corporate setting, I have had only one person ever display discomfort being recorded. One. And I've been all over the world like it. I want you to transcribe your interviews. Here are some options. There's Trent, there's Temi, there's Otter, there's Rev. Or if you really want to get fancy about it, you can go to Fiverr or Upwork and hire a freelancer. Send them the recordings. It's like the Flavor Wave oven. They'll set it and forget it. And then once you get the recordings back and the transcripts, you can analyze with it. I like Delve. It's simple. It's really good for applied researchers who don't want to spend a ton of money on like Atlas TI or any of the other major tools, qualitative analysis tools, and you code the interviews. And by what I mean by coding is you're going through and you're looking for themes and similarities between all the interviews. You're pulling out things that are important, and then you're going to make comparisons across them. And then ultimately, you're going to take that. Now, something I teach all my interviewers is this. I am a huge fan of The Godfather, right? The Godfather sitting there on the right. And on the left is Tom Hagen, and he is the consigliere. He's the advisor to The Godfather. I tell my researchers this: we don't deliver data, and we don't deliver insights. We deliver counsel. We don't deliver data. We don't deliver insights. We deliver counsel. We give advice to the business. You give advice to the business, and then you tell the business how they're going to operationalize what you've done. If you don't do this, what ends up happening is you create a bunch of data and information that's just not getting used. So at the end of your research, there are 3 things that I require my researchers to do, and that I would encourage you to pick up today. One is when we're delivering research, the first thing we're delivering is a point of view. That is our recommendation. We're saying from the data and what we know about the business and all of these things, remember we're going back to the background information that I made you put on the research report in the beginning. From all of this, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. It's a really uncomfortable thing to start doing because we like to hedge our bets. People don't want to be wrong. So instead of being wrong, they'll say, well, you could do this or you could do this, but the decision's kind of yours. And by saying that, you're basically, the business is like, well, I don't know. I mean, tell us what this all means. After you've given the point of view, I want you to give a summary. And the summary is like, okay, here's the executive summary. Here's what we think you should do. Here's an executive summary supporting it. And then I want you to reaffirm this is the decision you should make. Amazon teaches its people that there are 2 types of decisions. There are reversible decisions and there are irreversible decisions. 99% of the decisions we make are reversible. You'll be able to reverse them. So you're going to give them some advice. And the reality is in the police world, we use this phrase, it's the facts and circumstances available at the time. So we're giving you advice with the facts and circumstances available at the time, which is real time because we just did interviews. It's not backward looking. It's not from a year ago. I mean, the reality is nobody could have predicted the business impacts from COVID before COVID hit the way it hit, because if you were looking backwards to get that data, you'd never have gotten it. So there are reversible decisions and irreversible decisions. Remember that most decisions are reversible. For the irreversible ones, we want to be a little more conscious of those. But remember, the key here is to focus on the quality, not on the quantity. So I know I blasted through that relatively fast. I wanted to make sure I got through it and leave some time for questions. So I will remind you, it has long been an axiom of mine that the little things are infinitely the most important, but to a great mind, nothing is little. And so with that, I would open it up for if there are any questions or if there are any comments or disagreements or agreements.
Hey, Ari, it's Bill.
Hey, Bill.
All right. Looks like we had, well, a couple of questions. Will this be available? Will your slide deck be available after presentation?
I don't see why not. Yes, I will I'll get a PDF version to you and you can share it out as you see fit.
Yep. We'll post it on the conference website along with the archive video, and all will be available. Second question was, can you finish the story from your attention grabber, please? Ah,
that's funny. So the child, right? Because I had a few good stories, I thought. But the child abuse case, we ended up investigating that. The child was definitely abused and neglected. I gave you the 6 data points that I think proved that. But obviously, as detectives, we dig a lot deeper. The child did have some developmental delay, but not enough to be put in a diaper. I ultimately charged the mother. He lived with his mother and grandmother. The grandmother was about 50% lucid. The mother, though, was completely lucid, and I ended up charging her with homicide for the death of the child. It was a really, really sad case. It's probably one of the most touching things that I've ever had to go through. And she ended up getting convicted of that. It's a sad story. There's never a good ending to those cases. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to have served and gotten to help close that up and hold the people accountable for those kind of bad actions.
It's funny, Ari, I always ask people, the question of how did you get into research? And I think you get the gold medal for for one of the most interesting paths. Because I feel like all of us sort of make our way into this industry from a lot of different backgrounds.
Yeah, it was an interesting path, but I think yes, it was an interesting path. And I don't know many others that have done it. Although I think detective work and insights work is very, very similar in a lot of ways.
That may be it for follow-up questions. Just checking one more. Yep, it looks like that's it. Any parting shots for us, Ari?
No, I think obviously you can always visit if you have questions, you could visit me at my website, which is arizelmanow.com. I put my email on this last slide if you have questions. And then I offer I offer some interview training that helps professionals become better interviewers through Interview Jumpstart and Interview University. That's the Interview Jumpstart's a good starting point, but Interview University as well. Those are the pathways.
All right, fantastic. Well, that gives us about, looks like 15 or so minutes before the top of the hour. Let everybody take a break, grab a beverage or some lunch if you see fit, and we will see you in just a few. All right, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.